Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of TalentED, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of education, leadership, and talent. And I'm your host, Dr. Eric Skanson. Today, we have a guest whose name is synonymous with dedication, passion, and innovation in the field of education. So allow me to introduce Sofia Gonzalez, a nationally recognized Educator of the Year, an extraordinary nonprofit leader for the organization Project 214, an impactful education activist hailing from the Chicagoland area. Sofia wears multiple hats, not only as a high school teacher with 15 years under her belt, but also as a podcast host, a teacher leader. She's known for captivating public speaking skills, cutting edge presentations, dynamic illustrations. Trust me, her passion is not only evident, but it is absolutely infectious. When I first met her, I was so thrilled to have the conversation with her, and it was so fun. So just a little bit more, Sofia is an alum of the prestigious programs such as Fulbright, Latinos for Education, and the Urban Leaders Fellowship. And currently, which is so impressive, she's taken her talents to the national stage as a school ambassador fellow with the U.S. Department of Ed. So Sofia's unyielding commitment to education equity makes her just a leading voice for not just the classrooms of today, but for our ever-evolving educational landscape. So, Sofia, with that introduction, I welcome you to TalentED. We're absolutely thrilled to have you on the show.
Thank you, Eric. I'm so excited to be here. I think this is going to be a fun time.
Yeah, for sure. Tell us about yourself. Tell us, what do we need to know about Sofia?
I mean, other than that intro, I thought that was enough. I mean, that was just like setting the stage. No, I mean, again, you realize early on, or at least you hope to, right, what you were created to do. And as soon as I stepped foot into that classroom, the fall of 2009, in an inner city charter within the city of Chicago, I knew, I'm like, okay, this is definitely not just a career choice for me, but it is definitely a calling. And I've just been so passionate about the world of education ever since. I mean, I am married. I have two kids. One is 17 who goes to the West Campus because I currently teach in my home district. And then I have a 9-year-old daughter who's in dual language, and definitely a guardian of culture. And as a proud Mexican Rican Latina, I really want my daughter and my son to know their language and to honor it. So I'm just having a great time, Dr. Eric, just traveling the country and just really championing for this idea of equal education opportunity. You know, your zip code should never determine your destiny. Neither should your school zip code as a teacher determine the resources that you are given. And it is there where I've been championing for that rally cry.
Well, I'm so glad you kind of gave us a segue into this pursuit of educational equity. Can you share with us maybe even just a pivotal moment or experience that led you down this path?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, for those who hear me speak with my different keynotes and sessions that I give, I always tell the same story because it's really like the centrality of my message, and it's where it all began. So as I mentioned, I started teaching in an inner city charter school for students who were either kicked out or dropped out of the Chicago public school system. And their last chance was with our charter school network. That's still to this day is the only charter school network within the city of Chicago that services this specific student body. And it was like a baptism by fire. Like when I say that it was episodic, cinematic, stand and deliver, freedom riders kind of stuff, I am not. I literally had to hit the ground running. My students were aging out 19, 20, 21 years old. And I just saw some of the most despairing issues that the state of education has faced and will continue to face if we don't really get in front of it. In my life, the school to prison pipeline was just front and center. And I had undercover cops coming into my classroom, yanking my students out during sixth period English. I had young moms, 19, 20 years old, with 2, 3 kids with no registered address. And it wasn't until my second year of teaching that I started losing my students to gang to gun violence. And so you talk about that pivotal moment. I'm kind of building to it. I'll never forget my first student funeral. And I think that that was a pivotal moment for me. Walking into the Catholic church with my students and staff, our student unfortunately was in a gang and was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and the rival gang did take his life. And I remember meeting his mom in the parking lot, and we exchanged words, and I said something to her, Eric, that changed my trajectory forever and became the thesis
Mm.
statement of my life. I said, in the name of your son, I'm going to do something about this. I don't know what, but with my heart, with my hands, with this classroom. And it has been like almost 15 years later, and I have not broken my promise. I knew right then and there, I'm like, yep, I've got to be more than just a teacher, because it's not just the difference between academic success and failure as it is between life and death for some of our nation's students. But in that space as well, right? Changing the narrative. My students were resilient. They survived things that most adults cannot handle. Many of them graduated and were able to move forward, right? But it's always those intense moments that really create like
Mm.
pivotal moments for your life. And it was right then and there. My classroom became a sanctuary. It became a fight for justice. It became a platform for reform and for change. And I have spent the rest of my career, even up to this point, amplifying the voices and the narratives and the lived experiences of those very proximate to these issues that the state of education needs to fight.
I do have a question for you, Sophia. So when the movie premieres of your life, do I
Oh
get
my
to
God.
come? Sophia, do I get to come?
I would really hope that you will, because now you're part of my journey.
Yeah.
This is not happenstance. This is very intentional. That's what I believe in my heart of hearts. This is a critical moment, even right now in this space for you. I know that this is
Hmm.
a special moment here.
Awesome. Um, let's talk a little bit about, you've been a part of some pretty esteemed fellowship programs, including the Fulbright and the Urban Leaders Fellowship. How have these spaces and your national networks supported or shaped your efforts in education and activism?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things that I always speak on is these spaces, and specifically because one of the things that I'm very passionate about is diversifying the teacher workforce and just the benefits that it has for all students.
Hmm.
And I think back on my journey and how the first couple of years are formative for all of us as educators. And those were the most traumatic for me. And unfortunately, I didn't have a lot of mentorship. I didn't have a lot of supports that were in place. And even moving further on in my teaching journey. And so I had to, in order to survive, I felt, because I've just been in urban education my entire 15 years. That's where I want to be. That's where I choose to be.
Hmm.
And that's where I know that I have to be. And so I started looking into these fellowship spaces to be in the room with other like minded and with other renegades and with other justice warriors that would
Renegades, yes.
affirm that these freedom fighters were just like, wow. And so the first fellowship that I engaged with Latinos for Education. And they are an incredible force that is changing the game, the narrative, and dare I say, policy for the Latino educator and the Latino leader in multiple spaces within the K through 12 and post-secondary space. And they taught me, Eric, how to lead from my identity. That was mind-blowing to me. They're like saying stuff to me like, you are your ancestors' wildest dreams. We are the ones that we are waiting for.
Uh-huh.
Lead from your identity and acknowledge the cultural landscapes and the identities of others in front of you. Man, that just blew my life on fire. I was like, yo, you're asking me to tap into my Latinidad, to the power of my ancestors. It is on now. And man, that really did something, because the students that I primarily serve are from Mexico, they're first gen. And there was just such an explosion in my classroom, from the representation of our flag to the disruption of the text to seeing the heroes of our culture
Mhm.
and the massive, massive impact that they've made. That was Latinos for Education, right? And then Fulbright really opened the classroom door for me and blew open my classroom walls, is what I like to say. And I have this new phrase where I say, the world is a global classroom, and truly every student matters. And I've always been global minded because I've done a lot of social activism work, like outside the classroom. I've traveled to different countries and offered relief and aid and clothes and food in different parts of the world. And tying that into the classroom and this global competency framework that Fulbright gave me just fanned an even greater flame within me, leading from my identity, engaging these global competency frameworks. As I was mentioning to you, I just got back from India. I was in India this past summer with some of the most incredible colleagues that I met from around the world. And let me tell you something, Fulbright is not easy to get into because it is a very prestigious fellowship with the U.S. Department of State, and they are the mother flagship of teacher exchanges. And it was a blessing. It was a blessing and an honor to examine education from a global perspective, looking at India, their culture, their use of technology, the way they engage teaching and learning, teacher leadership. It was phenomenal. The food was amazing, a little spicy. And I even got to see one of the seven wonders of the world. I was at the Taj Mahal.
Taj
I'm like,
Mahal.
oh my gosh. And I can keep going. And then I'll just quickly mention Urban Leaders Fellowship. Last year, I had the opportunity to engage policy and practice in Washington, D.C. And I stayed there an entire summer, and I worked with a council member in Ward 3 in Washington, D.C. And then I also worked with a nonprofit organization that was stationed in Maryland, and we were just engaging policy and just really making what the late John Lewis says, some good trouble.
Good trouble. I love your passion. I could listen to you all day, and you talk about like invoking ancestors and bringing that into your story. It really is infectious when they say, your education, your passion for education is infectious. I have to totally agree, whether it's your teaching that you've done or your public speaking or your activism. But I want to circle back to this ancestors piece, and you carrying that story forward as the only Latina in your current school ambassador fellowship with the U.S. Department of Education. What are you going to do with that? What unique perspectives are you going to bring, or what do you hope to advocate for during your time in this program?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And it's something that, if I'm very honest, I am grappling with, but I have a plan, right? I definitely have a plan. Even before we were, asked to enter the fellowship, which, by the way, was the most grueling interview process of my
I
entire
bet.
it was the U.S. Department of Education. Say no more, right? But they asked us to develop a capstone idea that really reflects the priorities of the Department of Education. And currently, we have a Puerto Rican Secretary of Education, Dr. Miguel Cardona, fellow Boricua, so I'm really excited about that. And he's championing for this idea of bilingualism is our superpower, and really traveling the country with that. And so I have something in mind with that piece. And so I'll just give you my title. It's a working title, but what I want to examine is this: the intersectionality of teacher trauma, a leaky pipeline, and the bilingual classroom. And I really want to talk about, examine, and interrogate those gray spaces that I feel like if we lean into, if we shed a light, we will move the needle forward, sister, and in forward motion. Case in point, we cannot address the broken teacher pipeline without addressing teacher trauma and how that leans into attrition. We cannot address the bilingual education classroom where we have an enormous amount of newcomers that are coming from different countries, are multilingual learners. I like to say multilingual instead of English as a second language, because it's all about speaking from an asset framework versus a deficit mindset. Language matters. I digress. If we don't address, right, how we're going to recruit and retain a diverse teacher workforce that oftentimes leans into the bilingual education classroom because of their cultural landscape and their sensitivity to the multiplicity of cultures that are in front of them. So I really want to talk about those different pieces that are oftentimes isolated, but they're so interconnected, Eric, and I want to build a case. I definitely am a recipient of vicarious trauma, of secondary trauma, of compassion fatigue, and early on in my career, and I'm very open with it. I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. When you're that close, when you're that proximate, right? When you're visiting kids in the ICU with bullet holes in their skin, when you're burying them with their jerseys and with their Jordans, come on now. Like, you cannot
That's a
leave
lot.
unscathed if you don't care. And those are the issues that I want to amplify. Those lived experiences, man. Those like boots on the ground, close to the issues, really loving on these kids and really wanting to make critical changes for the sake of our future, right? Because if you invest in some of these issues, I feel like, and I argue, you are investing in the prosperity of our nation. And so I've got a tall order, but I know that my passion, I know that my lived experiences as an inner city urban educator, as a Mexican, all of these different lived experiences and all these different dynamics as to who I am as an individual, I know will elevate me. And there's this saying, right? Like, if you're not invited to the table, just bring a folding chair. I like to say, Dr. Eric, I am the table. I am the dang table. And so let me tell you something. I'm coming through here. That's it. You got me all fired up, and I'm just sitting down here on the Zoom. Imagine me on the stage, and imagine me in the classroom, and imagine me with different stakeholders. You will all hear Mrs. G today.
I have zero doubt that we will hear your message. That is a future that is worth looking forward to. As I hear you talk about the possibilities of what could be these key initiatives and changes that you want to see implemented going into our landscape of 21st century, it is really about ensuring this greater equity and opportunity for our students. And I'm so excited for what you're going to be bringing to both the Department of Ed through your experiences and potentially any stages that we can get you booked on. Like, everybody, you have to bring her in and listen to her. You have to. Sofia, I'm going to switch gears on us and do just a few quick questions that are maybe a little bit more lighter than 21st century bilingual Department of Ed. So, I mean, here's your first question. It's been said that you're known for dynamic illustrations during presentations. So, if you had to draw your journey in education so far using only emojis, what would it look like?
Wow. I mean, there's such an array of emojis, and that's such a good question. I just might have to take that as a podcast host. Okay, let me think. For sure, I would definitely have the starry-eyed emoji, right? Definitely starstruck with the world of education and its possibilities and student impact and just being with the kids. Heart emoji, love this, but also the emoji with like the one that's like in awe or shock, like the one that's just like with the mouth open. That one as well. And then definitely a crying emoji.
Strong.
For sure. And then as you're referencing, yes, definitely gaining my strength. And definitely the one with the glasses, the flames, the mic.
I love it. I'm gonna see if I can even put that string together for us and send it to you. That might be fun.
Let's do it.
You mentioned this. You're an Educator of the Year podcast host, public speaker. So we know you have a lot of talents, but I'm going to ask you to kind of open up the black box right now. Do you possess a talent that we might be surprised about?
I mean, I've shared this on the road and in my presentations and even in my classrooms, but I'm a poet. And I've been doing slam poetry, spoken word poetry. I even have a published book that I don't really promote all the time. And maybe I should. I don't know. Doctor, we could talk about this, but it's an old poetry book called Movements. I self-published in 2004. but I am a hopeless romantic. I'm a poet, a spoken word artist, and that's something that people do know about me, but some folks don't until they hear me
Hmm.
or until I trickle it into some of my keynotes. Because I do like to trickle in like excerpts of my spoken word pieces
Mm-hmm.
to create like this multi-sensory type of
Oh,
experience.
that's incredible. Here's my secret that I'll tell you. I can
Tell me,
juggle fire and knives.
no, you can't.
Mm-hmm. For real.
Where? How? When?
That is a story for another podcast.
Oh, you
On
see.
that origin story. I will tell you this though, the origin stories have to do with a 180-acre farm out in northern Minnesota when I was a teenager and had nothing else to do. And I just decided I was going to do it. So there we go. Okay,
Wow.
last
Do
question.
not try it at home. Do not try it at home, folks.
We know you're also about cutting edge presentations, but let's switch gears for a moment. If you were to host a late night talk show, which I think you
Mm.
would be fabulous at, by the way, who would be your dream first guest? And what would be your first question you would ask them?
Oh my God. First of all, I love these questions. I'm here for it. But wow, I'm so on the spot right now. Um, dang. Let me see. There's just so many. My goodness, like just top of mind. I don't know why I'm thinking of AOC.
Mm-hmm.
Having AOC on with the squad. I don't know. Maybe Michelle Obama. Malala, Dolores Huerta. Jeez, like those would be like probably top on my list. But the first person, for the sake of your question and for the sake of time, AOC came to mind. Um, and for those of you who don't know, right, Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, okay,
Mm-hmm.
representative of New York. She's on the Hill,
On
and
the
she
hill.
is she is definitely someone who gets in some crazy trouble. And I would ask her, man, girl, where's that fire from? And
Mm-hmm.
where can we access it within ourselves? I think
Nice.
that I would start with that.
Well, here I'm going to summarize just a little bit. We've talked about Sophia, equity, bilingualism, like a vision for the future. Her own talk show host. She is a poet. There's all sorts of great things that we've covered here today. I'm going to give you an opportunity right now for one last call to action for those that are listening today.
Whew. Call to action. For sure. I mean, there's something about collective agency and there's something about folks coming together. You know, a nation divided got us in this mess as it relates to the state of education, to the world of education, to the systems that were not designed for certain folks to thrive. But a united front can get it. So there's power in collective agency and using your assets and your gifts to be a positive contributor to this world. And I believe that that is all of our civil and social responsibility to make whatever part of the world that we're in a much better place
Mm.
than when we left it.
It's all about building the Commonwealth, right? Let's build a Commonwealth that really means all of us. Well, folks, we've come to the end of yet another, I think, fabulous episode of TalentED. A big thank you, Sophia, for joining us today and sharing your invaluable insights into education, into equity, into power of passion. Like from your journey toward education equity, excuse me, from your journey, we've learned about education equity, the critical work that you're doing with the Department of Ed. I think that you truly embody what it means to be a leading voice in the education landscape. We laughed a little bit. We found some passion, right? We found some emojis. If you have enjoyed today's episode, I want you to be sure to subscribe, rate, share this podcast so that others can join us in this journey towards a better education and leadership. And remember, whether you're an educator, an administrator, a student, or simply someone interested in making a difference, building that commonwealth, let's keep this momentum going. And as we say on TalentED and myself, stay PKS, which is positive, kind, and supportive. And until next time, thank you, Sophia. This is Dr. Eric Skanson signing off.